Dear colleagues, we have been trying to tell you something for 40 years, and we are not sure you have heard us. In 1985, we showed you that aerobic exercise produced meaningful antidepressant effects in clinical populations. You noted it with interest and returned to prescribing SSRIs. In 1999, James Blumenthal at Duke University ran the study you asked for. A randomized controlled trial directly comparing exercise to sertraline for major depressive disorder. Exercise performed as well as the drug at 16 weeks. At 10 months follow-up, the exercise group had significantly lower relapse rates than the medication group. You read it. You found methodological concerns. You continued prescribing SSRIs. In 2006, John Ratey at Harvard published Spark, summarizing the neurobiological mechanisms. Exercise increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, by up to 300% acutely. BDNF is the protein that promotes the growth, survival, and differentiation of neurons. It is what one researcher called miracle grow for the brain. Every major antidepressant produces some BDNF increase. Exercise produces more. You found it interesting. In 2010, a meta-analysis of 23 studies involving over 977 participants confirmed the antidepressant effect of exercise across populations. In 2016, a Lancet Psychiatry study of 1.2 million Americans found that people who exercised regularly reported 1.5 fewer days of poor mental health per month, which, across a population, represents an extraordinary reduction in suffering. In 2023, a meta-analysis published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine analyzed 1,039 trials covering 128,119 participants and concluded that exercise was 1.5 times more effective than medication or therapy for depression, anxiety, and psychological distress. 1.5 times more effective than medication. This finding was reported by some science journalists. It was not announced in a press conference. No pharmaceutical company had invested in its development. There was no market for what cannot be patented. We are not writing to suggest that medication is without value. We are writing to say that you have in your possession knowledge of an intervention more effective than the drugs you primarily prescribe, with no dangerous side effects, no cost at scale, and 40 years of supporting evidence. And this intervention is mentioned in most clinical encounters as an afterthought, if at all. We understand why. We understand the time constraints, the reimbursement structures, the liability concerns, the difficulty of compliance monitoring, the pharmaceutical relationships, the education infrastructure built around pharmacological treatment. We just wanted to say clearly, on the record, we told you. Sincerely, the evidence to whom it may concern, I want to explain what I do, since you seem to have decided I am not worth competing with. I produce norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin simultaneously in a single session. I produce endorphins, which are endogenous opioids, molecules your body makes that bind to the same receptors as morphine, without the addiction profile. I produce endocannabinoids, the brain's internal cannabis system, which is why people sometimes describe a sustained aerobic session as producing a warm, calm, mildly euphoric state. I produce BDNF, the neurotrophin that promotes neurogenesis in the hippocampus, the brain structure most associated with learning and memory, and the one most visibly atrophied in major depression. I grow new brain cells in the hippocampus, in adults. Something your industry struggled to believe was possible until the evidence was too large to dispute. I reduce cortisol, I reduce inflammation. The systemic inflammatory state now implicated in depression, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, and several cancers. I improve insulin sensitivity. I strengthen the heart muscle directly. I increase bone density. I improve sleep architecture. I extend the healthy human lifespan by a documented average of 3 to 7 years for regular practitioners. I do all of this simultaneously, in a single session, for every person who engages with me, without a prescription, without a patent, without a quarterly earnings report. You chose not to compete with me because you cannot charge for me. I understand the business logic. I just want it stated plainly. The most powerful pharmaceutical available to the human body has no manufacturer. It was here before your industry existed. It will be here after. You have built a very sophisticated system for treating the diseases that my absence produces. I am not angry about this. I just want people to know what I am. Yours, exercise. I know you're busy. I know the workout feels like optional expenditure on days when everything else is mandatory. I know there are easier things to do with 30 minutes. I know the couch exists and Netflix is very good. I want to tell you what happens to me when you don't move. I have a structure called the hippocampus. It processes memory. It is one of the only regions in the adult brain where new neurons can grow. A process called neurogenesis that your 2000-era biology textbook probably told you was impossible. The textbook was wrong. Neurogenesis happens in your hippocampus continuously throughout your life in response to specific signals. The primary signal for hippocampal neurogenesis is aerobic exercise. When you run or swim or cycle or do anything that elevates your heart rate to 60 to 70% of maximum for 20 or more minutes, BDNN, FAM-F, floods my hippocampus. New neurons grow. The existing neurons form stronger connections. The cognitive functions that depend on hippocampal health, memory formation, spatial navigation, emotional regulation, the ability to distinguish new situations from familiar ones, all improve. When you don't exercise, the neurogenesis rate drops. The hippocampus, over months and years of sedentary life, measurably shrinks. Not metaphorically. On MRI scans, the hippocampal volume of sedentary middle-aged adults is measurably smaller than that of active adults of the same age. The hippocampus is also the brain structure most damaged by chronic stress and most associated with depression. The patients whose hippocampi are most atrophied are the most severely depressed. Exercise grows back what stress takes. I need you to understand this not as motivation. I know motivation is unreliable, and I am not writing this to make you feel motivated. I am writing this because you deserve to know what the stakes actually are. The 30 minutes you are deciding whether to spend on this, they are not cosmetic. They are not about how you look. They are about whether the parts of me that help you remember things, regulate your emotions, and navigate your life with clarity and resilience are maintained or allowed to slowly atrophy. I cannot force you. I can only tell you what I know. I know a great deal about what happens when you don't. Please consider moving today. Your brain, on behalf of your future self.